the best way to do that is to help me run for the Senate here in Texas. We ran a real close race and we lost, and a few years later I found myself actually about 470, so it was a rather bizarre circumstance here. I found myself. What North Korea does is make the case for going and dealing with Iraq, because now we see very clearly what happens with inaction. If you try and temporize, if you try and conciliate, if you try and accommodate, because that's what the Clinton administration did in 1994 when they signed that framework agreement with North Korea, which many of us condemned at the time as a mistake, because we said you can't trust these people. And now, lo and behold, here we are in 2002, and we find you can't trust them. Not if you don't go to the Security Council to be right. It's not a cry for help. It may be yet another attempt to blackmail the West into giving them things in order to extract a promise that they won't develop nuclear weapons. But what good is that promise? We now know what good it is. It isn't any good. Convention in Kansas City in 1976, where Jerry Ford was nominated by only 30. President Ford asked me to go over to the President Ford Committee and be a delegate hunter for him in his other, and in the general election, President Ford. I would almost bet you that we will go back now to a muscular policy of containment. That can mean economic sanctions through the international community or otherwise, or ad hoc with other countries. It can mean political sanctions. It can mean embargoes. It can mean beefing up our forces on the Korean Peninsula to make certain that we're not going to be subject to blackmail, whether it's conventional weapon blackmail or nuclear blackmail.
In regard to anthrax, we accumulated huge amounts of wide spectrum.
If and when the opportunity will ever emerge to execute it.
Told us well in Europe what the price of paralysis.
I don't see a lot of hope for the immediate future from an American envoy zone. The argument that goes around the world that maybe the Israeli-Palestinian negotiation should be given a push before Americans trying to focus on Iraq is misleading. I don't believe that it has any chance of being successful in the present situation of Palestinian streets. And the only one that will enjoy it will be Saddam Hussein somehow, since it will detract the attention from him towards something that will take a lot of time.
During the campaign in Afghanistan, soccer game took place in Tehran, and the youngsters of corner he might consider using against American assets.
If Saddam Hussein is at certain point later during this year or early next year, he is removed, it will create a window of opportunity for forward movement on the Israeli-Palestinian track.
The 250,000 of soldiers of all services. But before I come to it, let me tell you that the bottom line, to the best of my judgment,